very much, and thanks for the organizers for inviting us. This is a great opportunity. So this is joint work with John Brasiers, James Choi, Joel Dixon, and Fiona,
Speak into the mic if you would, please.
Who are my colleagues at Vanguard. They're here today, and David Leibson. It'll be a little bit of a break from this morning's session, which was about spending during retirement. This will be about spending before retirement, but using retirement savings. So slightly different. So we know that building emergency savings is often a challenge for American households. Anna Maria gave a statistic last night about how many people can come up with $2,000 in a month. My stat is about, there's a Federal Reserve survey showing that 37% of adults couldn't cover an unexpected $400 expense in cash. So we know this is a challenge for a large cross-section of American households. One of the objectives of Secure 2.0 was to make 401k assets more liquid and easier to use for emergencies before retirement. There are now two new optional liquidity features that plan sponsors can implement. The first is these pension-linked emergency savings accounts, which allow participants to save into a sidecar account with Roth deferrals. And the other is new penalty-free emergency withdrawals, which allow people to take $1,000 withdrawals without paying an early distribution penalty once per year. And we're going to focus on the emergency withdrawal provision because it's much simpler to implement and more likely to be taken up in the near term by employers. So what are these emergency withdrawals? They're essentially a dollar-capped and penalty-free version of the hardship withdrawals that many plans now offer. So up to $1,000 per year, there's no 10% early distribution penalty, and plan sponsors can rely on participants' self-certification of financial needs, so there's kind of no documentation or administrative hurdle to taking these. So with this extra liquidity value, that could potentially help a lot of participants cover urgent spending needs, maybe prevent them from resorting to high-interest debt to cover those. And if people know that their 401k assets are going to be more liquid, they might even be encouraged to participate or to contribute more to the plan in the first place, and those are good outcomes. But if people are taking repeated $1,000 withdrawals, these can be taken once per year. That could add up to a substantial amount of leakage over the course of a career, especially for lower and middle income participants. So the question we ask in this paper is, how can plan sponsors offer this new liquidity mechanism while also trying to minimize the long-run costs from leakage and retirement wealth accumulation? So our proposal is what we're terming automatic repayment. So taking what we know from the automatic enrollment literature about participant inertia and the power of defaults, let's consider a policy where plan sponsors actively encourage or even automatically implement a contribution rate increase for participants taking these withdrawals. And so the idea is that the contribution increase would serve to effectively repay the withdrawal, return the $1,000 back to the account within a reasonable time frame, and turn it into something that's more like a loan than a withdrawal. So we can't study emergency withdrawal takers directly. Obviously, the provision just became effective, but there's actually a pretty close empirical analog in historical 401k data, which is plan loans. And for those who aren't familiar with the idea of a plan loan, it's a common feature that plan sponsors offer, and participants can borrow against their balance. So if I want to take a $1,000 loan, I get a $1,000 check from my 401k account. And then I have to repay it. Repayment is mandatory, but I'm repaying myself. And it occurs through the same automatic payroll deferrals that my normal contributions occur through. So it's just an additional payroll deferral. And our main finding is that elective contributions are remarkably stable during loan repayment. So in the 2 years following loan issuance, loan takers' contribution rates fall only by about 0.8 percentage points relative to a control group of non-loan takers. And I want to emphasize how surprising this finding is, because at the moment of loan issuance, there's these mandatory repayments occur. So if you add these new repayments plus their old elective contributions, there's actually a sharp increase in the total savings rate that loan takers, their total outlays to the plan at the time of loan issuance. So we conclude that participants taking emergency withdrawals would likely show kind of a similar capacity to maintain their previous elective contributions, but also repay this liquidity-based distribution over a reasonable time frame. And we show that most people could probably do this within 12 to 18 months with a 2 percentage point increase in their contribution rate. And that's kind of the narrow framing around this emergency withdrawal provision. The broader framing is that, there's a discussion yesterday about what's the optimal default contribution rate. Is it 3%? Is it 6%? Is 3% too low? Can people afford to save more? And often we're lacking the information to make that assessment. But loan repayment is kind of a unique opportunity where we can see, well, actually, can this participant support a higher deferral rate for a sustained period of time? And most often, they are capable of doing that. So it's kind of revealed information about their savings capacity. So a few caveats. So again, the implicit assumption here is that participants taking small loans, a lot of times will focus on loans for $1,000 or less, those that are most comparable to a $1,000 withdrawal, that they're going to be similar to future emergency withdrawal takers. That's kind of the implicit assumption here. We can't observe financial behavior outside the 401k plan. We'd love to, but we don't currently have that capability. So there was also discussion yesterday about whether incremental savings are financed with other forms of debt. So that's a relevant concern here, and we'd like to address that question in the future, but we don't currently have information about the liability side of the balance sheet for these participants. And there are some technical considerations that would come into play here, like how this is implemented. There are kind of gaming incentives that arise from employer matches, so those would need to be sorted out as sort of logistical concerns. So the data we use is administrative record keeping data from Vanguard, and our main sample will be participants who take a loan issuance in 2021. We follow them for 2 years after the loan issuance, so our data run through 2023. This is the latest cohort we can use. We also show the results are essentially the same in a 2017 sample, so kind of there's not any pandemic-specific factors that are kind of driving the 2021 results. And I don't know if we'll get there today, but we also kind of do a supplementary analysis of participants taking hardship withdrawals. There's not that built-in repayment feature with hardship withdrawals, but they're still kind of informative for thinking about how participants taking the new emergency withdrawals might behave. Some summary statistics, just so we know kind of who we're talking about and how big the sample sizes are. So for both loan takers and hardship withdrawal takers, the median participant is about in their early 40s, about plan tenure of about 5 years. Loan takers have slightly higher incomes than hardship withdrawal takers, but in both cases, the median's around $55,000. And loans generally are larger than hardship withdrawals. You can see that the 10th percentile of the loan distribution is about 1,400. So when we're focusing on small loans of $1,000 or less, it'll be just less than 10% of the sample. But with 250,000 total loan takers, that's still about 20,000 of small loans that we can study. And so this is our main finding in one graph. So this is restricting to those small loans of $1,000 or less. And the data is monthly, and that's the x-axis, and month 0 is when the loan is issued. And you can see in month 0 these repayments begin, and the loan repayment rate here is the repayment amount divided by monthly income, so it's the share of your income that you're devoting to loan repayment. So that starts at about 2%, and it falls down, it decreases as participants begin to finish paying off their loans, and you can see that most people finish paying off between 12 and 18 months. And then during this whole time period, the elective contribution rate, kind of the normal ongoing 401k contributions, are remarkably stable. So you can see it's following this general upward trend before the loan issuance, and then it stops increasing, it flattens out, and then remains roughly constant at like 5.5–6% for that following 2-year period. So that's descriptively what's happening. Let's try to be a little more formal. So now we're going to compare loan takers to a control group. So for each loan taker, we're going to match them to a participant who's in the same plan, has the same plan tenure, an absolute age difference of 5 years or less, an income difference of 25% or less, and we're going to require that the control participant didn't take any loans or hardship withdrawals in that 6-month pre-period, so that they're kind of a non-loan taker we can compare to. And we're also going to require that they have the same elective contribution rate 6 months before the loan issuance. And so this is for the whole sample, so not just for small loans, so the entire loan taker sample. And you can see even relative to the control group, the crowd out is very small. So before loan issuance, they're following the same exact upward trajectory, and then right at the month of issuance, you can see the two groups diverge. So there is some amount of crowd out, but 2 years later, it's about 0.8 percentage points. So pretty much, even relative to a comparison group, pretty much almost all of their elective contributions have remained 2 years later, even though they're repaying kind of an extra 2, 3, 4, 5% of their income because they have to service the loan they just took out. So this is some heterogeneity. This is showing, just recentering the graph at 0, this is how much you've fallen relative to your control participant in terms of elective contributions. You can see the crowd out is actually smaller for the smallest loans. So those small loans, $1,000 or less, the crowd out is less than half a percentage point. And it reaches further towards 1 percentage point for larger loans. And the same pattern by income, so that the lowest income participants show the smallest crowd out of about half a percentage point. And then finally, I'll just wrap up here. So again, hardship withdrawals don't have this built-in repayment feature, but there is kind of this nice natural experiment between the 2017 and 2021 samples we use, which is that In 2020, there was an IRS rule change. Before 2020, a lot of plan sponsors were required to suspend contributions for participants taking hardship withdrawals for 6 months following the withdrawal. And that was eliminated in 2020, so it wasn't operative in the 2021 sample. You can clearly see the effect of that 6-month suspension. So it causes kind of about a 3% drop in employee contributions, and then because of employer matches, the total drop in savings is about 6.5%. And it completely goes away in the 2021 sample. So this is kind of another piece of evidence showing that when participants aren't forced to reduce their contributions after a liquidity-based distribution, when they, when they're allowed to continue contributing, they do. It's almost like night and day between 2017 and 2021. And again, I'll skip the kind of the last couple slides here. It's just showing explicitly that kind of most loans for $1,000 or less are repaid within 12 to 18 months. That was already kind of apparent from the first plot. And given the income distribution of the participants taking these kinds of loans and taking hardship withdrawals, generally that could be achieved with a 2 percentage point increase in the contribution rate within 12 to 18 months. So yeah, thank you very much.